Years ago, I had the pleasure to travel to India with my family. Now, India, it's this country of contrasts. It's got this amazing beauty, but it's got this extreme poverty too. But it's got one consistent fact: the kindness from the Indian people. And my family will remember this trip forever for all the kindness that was shown to us. Many years ago, an amazing American woman visited Dharamsala. It's a town in northern India. And in this town, she met this dog named Tommy. And her life was changed forever. Today, you're going to get a chance to meet her. Deb Jarrett, she's the founder of Dharamsala Animal Rescue, and she joins me. Oh, wait a minute, little tidbit. Dharamsala is the home of the Dalai Lama. That's right. Now, Deb's sheer determination just radiates from her. But what as I see it, her success can be found in the meaning of the India national motto, and that is, truth alone triumphs. And now with a lot of bumps in the road, her truth has triumphed. Rabies is rampant in India. It's estimated that one person dies every 30 minutes. Did you know that rabies is 99% fatal and 100%, let me repeat that, 100% preventable? Now, Deb takes that 100% to even a higher level, and the rescue is making this huge difference. This is a story of huge efforts Deb's gone through to make Dharamsala a safer and happier place for humans and animals. And remember, always be kind to strays. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. Today, I have Deb Jarrett with me. She's the founder and executive director of Dharamsala Animal Rescue. I'm terrible with names, everybody, as everybody knows. Deb, thanks so much for joining me. I know your rescues in India, in Dharamsala, but your story is pretty amazing, how you got started and all the crazy things that are going on in India and all that with animals. And I really appreciate you taking the time. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And yeah, it's a hard one to pronounce. It's Dharamsala.
Dharamsala.
It's Dharam. So I think most people, they would say Dharma because that's what
Right, the dog.
yeah. So, but it's Dharamsala. Yeah.
Dharamsala. But
But don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We call it Dar. We just call it Dar.
my kids just laugh at me when I talk because I always mispronounce words all the time. So it is what it is. Anyways, to get on track. So I want to hear the whole story. I know Dharamsala is really north, pretty close to Tibet and that. So let's talk about how you got there, what brought you there,
Sure.
and then we'll get into all the details about the rescue and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've always loved dogs. That's, for one thing, for sure. But when I worked in the tech industry for, God, maybe like 19 years or something. And I just used to like to travel to a new country every year. I feel like travel gives you perspective and just makes all your problems kind of not go away, but realize that they're pretty small in the big scheme of things,
Gives you a different perspective.
It just gives you perspective. And I grew up with my parents are big travelers. So I think it was just infused in me from a young age. So yeah, so I traveled, I'll try to make this short, but basically I traveled to Asia for the first time. I went to Japan when I was 38 or 39. And I had been to lots of places, but not to Asia yet. And I loved it. I loved how different everything was. I loved just everything was different, from the religion to the food to the culture to the just it was amazing to me. And I had met some expats who live there, and they basically said, well, if you think this is nutty, like, you should go to India.
Huh.
So of course I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go. And at that time in my life, like, I wasn't, I mean, I had a great life. I was living in Boulder, Colorado. I snowboarded, I hiked, I had a good job in tech, good friends, all this kind of stuff. But I just definitely felt like I needed something else. Like, I was clearly looking for something else. Anyway, I had no idea what that was going to be. So I ended up going to India, but through a volunteer program. And in the volunteer program, you could choose between being in Delhi, a major city, or Dharamsala, which was like a smaller mountain town at the foothills of the Himalayas. And at the time, I was living at the foothills of the Rockies. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go there. It's also, if anyone's ever heard of Dharamsala, it's because the Dalai Lama lives there, and that's where he ended up after he was kicked out of Tibet and a lot of the exiles. So it just seemed kind of like an interesting place to go. And I went there hoping to help women, like maybe with computer skills, and that's kind of what I signed up for. But when I got there, I ended up all the women were in the field cutting wheat because it was the harvesting season. So I ended up being put in with young children, sort of in a government run preschool on the bottom of a dirty temple floor.
Welcome to India, by the way.
Yeah, welcome to India. And I was staying in a place where, we had to take bucket showers, and it was we were taken care of, and there were other volunteers doing other things, but it was pretty primitive compared to how I had traveled before. And then I would walk to the temple every day to work, and I would see all these dogs. And there were some dogs that lived near us in the village that were just happy to see the white people, you could tell, because I think they were used to white people giving them food and attention. But then I had to walk through like the busy part of town, and I would see, I mean, one day I saw a dog get hit by a car, and everyone just kind of kept walking. And I saw shaking, dying puppies like on the steps of the temple, and everybody just walking on by. I mean, I also saw lepers, and I saw all these things I didn't know exist in the world today.
Sure.
And so that's sort of how I got there. And then I was with children, and most people who know me, like, I don't have kids. I love my nieces and nephews. And I think as I've gotten older, I'm definitely more attuned to thinking children are adorable. But at the time, which was 16 years ago, I wasn't. And so dealing with kids with, you know, snot running out of their nose, and like, and peeing, and, all this, and fighting and all this stuff. It was a real challenge for me. And in the meantime, there was dogs, specifically one dog that was in the outdoor area of the temple where the kids would play, and it was bloody and mangy, and I didn't even know if it was like alive, like the first time I saw it. And kids would pick up rocks and throw them at the dog, and I would want to kill these kids that I was trying so hard just to be nice to. And then I would be on the ground, like trying to see if the dog, was okay. And I didn't understand anything. I didn't understand anything about what was going on in India. I was so confused. And but and I would ask people, like, is there anybody we could call to get help for this dog? Like, people who were living around the temple, and they would just either ignore me or shrug their shoulders, or maybe in India they do like a little head wobble, and none of that. Obviously nobody was answering me in the way I wanted them to. So I ended up meeting, through the volunteer program. They would bring in different people from the community doing different things, and there was one guy who came in, and he was actually a bird. There's a lot of birds. I think more birds in the Himalayas than there are anywhere else in the world, or something. So took us on this bird watch, and he also then told us that he had a small NGO where they did street treatments for dogs. So I was like, oh my god, like, can you help this dog? So he did. So he ended up sending somebody to treat this dog for mange. And I wasn't there when this happened, and so the next time I went back to the school, this kid, this probably 20-year-old kid who I talked to before about getting help for the dog, came running over to me, like, so excited that I had gotten help for this dog, and then telling me his family was giving the dog medicine and giving the dog food, and they were gonna make sure the dog got better, and I was just like, "What in the hell just happened?" Like, last week or for the past 2 weeks, I've been asking for help with this dog. Everyone's, like, ignored me or, I didn't and then I realized, like, "Oh, well, these people just had no idea how to get help,"
Sure.
And besides that, they see so much, trauma on the street, like, walking around every day. Like, you have no choice but to put some blinders on because you can't help everybody, or every dog. But anyway, they were so excited, so I just was like, "Oh, well, maybe if people had the number to call, they would, and these animals would get help." And so that was sort of the impetus for, I was like, let's try to make this repeatable. Like, let's see who else is out there that will, you know, be interested in helping once I could help find a solution. So that was sort of the beginning of it. Yeah.
Couple things that
Yeah.
one real quick question. Now that you've been out there and you've created your rescue, and we'll get into that in a second.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the Dalai Lama there? Just out of curiosity?
Oh, yeah. Tons of times.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because Dharamsala is not that big of a place,
Right.
to be honest. Like, I mean, I think there's like, I mean, I don't know. The last time they did a census, they said there were 60,000 people, but I think there's more. But there's two main like town areas. One is sort of the Indian market. The other is where that's very touristy and where his monastery is, and where most of the Tibetans live, and where all the tourists go.
Sure.
And so you can go get audiences with him.
Really?
Yeah, and back in the day, like, way before I ever lived there, you used to be able to just go up to his house, apparently. Like, I know, white Buddhists that have lived there since, like, the '70s that have been to his home,
Wow.
but then
Of
security,
course.
because the Chinese are always out to get him, so
Sure.
the security is different, but the first time I saw him was actually on a plane, and, it was a small plane from Dharamsala to Delhi, and I was with my manager at the time, and everybody was so excited, and people were going up and saying hi to him, and yeah.
That's cool. So, a couple things. So, one other thing is I was thinking about when you were talking about, the kids are throwing rocks at the animals. Well, that's a cultural thing, and that's just how they were raised. And and then we were talking about the when you've got this dog help, and the 20-year-old came running up to you. Remind me that the old story about a calm lake. If you throw a pebble in, it causes these waves, and eventually they become bigger and bigger as time goes on. You spread it that way.
Yeah.
So it's kind of what you started, and that's how you started getting there. And, for anybody that's been to India, and I've had the opportunity to do it, the people are wonderful, but it's just a cultural thing. There's this understated beauty there. Then there's all this other stuff that's there too. So I get it. So keep going with your story. I just wanted to interject a couple things.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, and, but good point, like, I didn't understand why these kids were throwing rocks, so I eventually found out that, all of, that rabies is endemic in
Right.
India. It's got the highest rate of human deaths by rabies than any country in the world, and the World Health Organization estimates it at 1 person every half hour.
That's insane.
Yeah, they actually call it a neglected zoonotic disease. They have a list of them.
Uh-huh.
This is all stuff I've learned, right? But I mean, compared to like, I think malaria is 1 person every 30 seconds or something. Like, so
Right.
obviously that's going to get way more attention, right? But most people, not as much now, well, in Dharamsala, but have had someone in their lives, that have died from rabies. And most of the time it's from a dog bite. And most of the time it's children who are poor. So,
Well, I saw on your website a couple things using the numbers you have. You said that 95% of the time the rabies is from a dog bite.
yeah,
And then that 40% thing they were just talking about children, they're under 14.
under 14 and probably living in like a slum or a village and not,
Right,
educated, right?
right.
And then so these kids are told by their parents and grandparents that if you see a dog, you don't want to get bit by it, so you should throw rocks at it,
Right.
which is obviously the exact opposite thing you should do, but there's no education of telling them what to do, which is also why we have an education program. So all of this stuff is culture. Once you know it, I mean, yeah, it's hard for us to understand, like, why would they think throwing rocks is okay? But that's just what
They're protecting themselves.
they're protecting themselves, right? So,
And that goes along with your guys' mission, because I like what you say in your mission, and I'm not gonna say the whole thing because I want you to get into it. Your mission says, "End human street dog conflict."
yeah,
So, let's get into that and talk about that, because now you've got, I think the dog's name was Tommy, that you did this and you realize that they're just not educated on how to get them fixed.
yeah,
Let's hear the rest of the story.
yeah. So, yeah, so Tommy ended up fine. This was a long time ago now, I guess, yeah, 2008, which is so crazy to think about. And so I ended up starting this charity. I ended up starting a charity, and at first I was starting a charity, and I was living in the US and visiting once a year. I still had my tech job, and I was basically helping fund the man I met, to expand what he had been doing. So we ended up getting a clinic built. We realized that mass spay neuter really needed to be part of the program because we needed to stabilize the population and make that less. We needed to do mass rabies vaccination for the dogs. We needed to do rescue, obviously, and then we needed to educate the community that, or try to teach kids to start with and adults that they could be involved and that these animals could be their buddy if they treated them differently, like, and then you wouldn't have to be scared of a dog bite. Like, if we and you can help in your community by feeding these dogs, calling us and making sure they're vaccinated, calling us and making sure they're sterilized. And then with that, we can create a more harmonious environment and hopefully ending this conflict, which basically everything today is like massive hit and run accidents, like because dogs on the street and people don't care and they just run over them. There's people who beat them, people who like throw boiling water at them if they get too close to their food stand, people who, I mean, all lots of poisoning. Like, because there's people who, there might be one family feeding a bunch of dogs, and then the family next to them doesn't like that because they think it's dirty or they're barking or something, and then that family will poison their neighbor's dog. You know what I mean? So how do we fix this? Like, we I mean, things have improved where we are because it's now 16 years later, but it's not perfect. I would say once a year we still see a poisoning.
Well, one of the things when you were talking about when you're trying to teach kids, and I was thinking of, you can't relate to anything the way we've grown up here in the U.S., but the old saying, it starts at home.
Yeah.
And that's, and when you talk to a variety, I have the opportunity to talk to a lot of different rescues all over the world, and where everybody's learning is you've got to educate the kids.
Yeah.
That almost educates the parents to
Yes.
do this. And when you were talking about that, I was thinking about, they're trying, when they talk about throwing the rocks and all that kind of stuff,
Hmm.
really what they're doing are trying to protect themselves. But again,
Yeah.
by protecting themselves the way they're doing it, they're creating the same problem. You never think the bigger picture.
No, they're antagonizing the dogs because teaching the dogs that humans are awful,
Right.
that either the dog's going to hide from the humans or they're going to bark at them and try to bite them when they see them.
Right.
Like that's what. So we have a school program where we go in and we teach these things, and we do it in a fun way. We have a book that someone wrote that we get to read, which is great. It's called Sati, the street dog from Dharamsala, and it's a pretty aspirational story because the dog ends up adopted by a local family, and that's still something we struggle with. But it's a dog that's on the street, gets boiling water thrown at it. It comes to Dar. We treat it. It's happy. It's being cared for the first time in its life, and then a family adopts it. And then we also have training that was actually put together by a group called the Global Alliance for Rabies Control and the World Health Organization that has these booklets like showing, what to do, what not to do. And it's equating like treating like you're not going to go up and steal your mom's food. She wouldn't like that, right? So you're not going to go
Right.
try to steal the dog's food, like, you're not gonna hit your friend in the head, you know what I mean? So, like, you know what I mean? Like, all of these things, like, what would happen if you threw a rock at your dad?
Right.
So, like, just trying to and then we always bring, one of our dogs from the shelter who's great with kids and, like, we had this one dog who luckily just got adopted, but he would let, like, 70 kids pet him in a day.
That's great.
Like, he was so great. Like, he would never got overwhelmed, and by the end of the program, most of the kids were really excited to pet the dog even if they were scared.
Right.
So it was really great, and then we would have kids like, just in October, when I was visiting, we did a bunch of education programs, and one little girl, she stood up and raised her hand. I think she was like 11, and she was saying was really sad, and she was telling us a story about her family was feeding this mom dog outside their house, and then she had babies, and it was in the winter, which Himalayan winters are not, hot like a lot of people think India is hot everywhere, and so they were worried, so they started putting milk inside their house, so that and I guess what each day the mom would bring like a new puppy in the house and then all of a sudden the girl like tenses up and I can tell she's about to bawl and I'm like, "Oh no, like what happened to I think the dog's name is Oreo. Like what happened to Oreo?" She's like, "She's fine, but all of her puppies died." And she just started
Oh,
bawling.
yeah.
And then she said, and every day after the mom dog was just wailing. And then I would go to my bed and just put my head under my covers and cry.
Oh,
So she didn't even feel comfortable telling her parents. And she's like, "I'm just so glad you guys are here because this is the first time I told anybody this and you all understand."
oh, that's great. Well, that gives you another one main reason to be doing what you're doing.
No, so I just hugged her and I was like, "We totally understand. I'm so sorry." And anyway, yeah, so it just those are the things that keep you going?
But I wanna take a step back. So
Sure.
you've got the one dog, you go back home, and I know you've now started created your own issue now because 'cause you've gotta do this thing.
Yeah.
You fell in love with the realizing there was a problem, more of it was more a take charge kinda thing, I would assume.
Yeah.
So, how do you I mean, because you were back in the US when you were thinking about doing this and sending money over, how
Mm.
did you go from there to where you are now?
Mm. So I think what I thought because I think is that I figured that I could help.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like I was like, "Oh, here's something I could do where maybe I could have an impact." Like I saw my action as a loudmouth American saying, "We need help for this dog," right? And luckily finding some and then finding people that actually cared. So I was like, "Okay, so it's not about me, but maybe I can help find more of these people who care by having a clinic and a helpline phone number and veterinarians who can help with the dogs." And so that was sort of the impetus. So it wasn't like I ever thought I was going to move to India. But what ended up happening, and this is another dumb blonde American thing, and it's so funny. I have so many Indian friends now, and we just can all laugh about it. But I didn't realize that so I would send money, like, we would figure out projects we were working on, get stuff built, hire people. I would get the money, I would send it to India, and he would send me receipts and books and all this stuff, and I'd be like, "Cool," and then I would go visit, see the work every year, and what I didn't realize was that India, especially back then, was just a cash economy. So you could go into a store and say, "I'm buying, I don't know, you want to buy a vehicle, a rescue vehicle, let's say, right? Or well, let's say something smaller, like a washing machine.
Right.
Okay. And it costs a certain amount. And the shop owner will say, "Well, what do you want me to write the receipt for?" So then he would say, "Oh, like double the amount." And then he would send me the receipt. I would send him the money and he would be making money off of buying the washing machine. See what I'm saying?
No, I lost you there.
Okay. So let's say the washing machine was $100.
Okay.
All right. So he has the shop owner write the receipt for $200.
Okay.
So I sent him $200, so he's just made $100.
So they're upping your whatever what you wanted?
Yeah. So this is very common, not just in India, but I think a lot of white people who then go and start these things in other countries who've never seen this much money like coming at them,
Right.
right? Or they know exactly. This guy knew, this is what I found out later, that money would come, that it would be a way for him to make money.
Yeah, we're taking advantage of you.
Yeah, yeah. So eventually I would visit every year and I would start making friends in the community, and I would hear rumblings that money wasn't being spent the way I thought it was. And I'd be like, "Well, I don't know how that's possible. Like all the receipts are matched up and the books look good and, and then and then I have this big awakening.
Now I'm gonna use your term on your TED Talk, your aha moment.
Oh, yeah, so this was not a fun aha moment like the other one, yeah. So it was an aha moment that basically the guy had, probably stolen around $75,000.
Yeah, he was padding the invoices, basically what he's doing.
Yeah, he's padding invoices, and that's just a small example, and it's easy to do there because people will fake receipts, and you can get accountants to fake books, and as I had no idea.
Right.
So I ended up leaving my tech job, and deciding, well, long story, but I was kind of in a position where I could make a move. Like I broke up with a boyfriend, my 14-year-old dog passed away, and then I could get a year's severance from my company who had just gone through a merger. So I decided to take it and to go spend more time in India and see if I could figure out what was going on. And at that time period, the first time, I think I went for like 3 months, I figured out how all the stealing was happening. So then I confronted this man, moved things around, pulled funding from that group, put dogs and people who I trusted in like other buildings, got a few people in the community saying, listen, you can't stop this work. Like, we need it. Like, thank you for starting it. Don't judge all of us by this crook. And but if you need to live here to manage the money on both sides.
Right.
So that's when I had to make this decision, like, do I want to actually go live in India? And I did. So that's how I ended up living there and then starting it over again in 2013 from the ground up.
Yeah, you had to be hands-on, you have to be close to the pulse to make sure you're not then being taken advantage of.
Yeah, and I guess it's like anything, like you're starting anybody who starts even any kind of company, like it's your life, right? Like
Right.
you can't be jumping in and out. You've got to be fully involved if it's ever going to work, right? So yeah, so that's what happened. So I ended up moving there and then fighting this guy, like ending up in court with this guy for 5 years. Originally, I was winning, and we got a bunch of stuff stuff to start the second clinic again, and then they started fighting back, and so for 2 years, I was sort of being blackmailed, and I had to be interrogated. They would file all these fake charges against me. Anyway, and I ended up in police stations, and yeah.
An American in India trying to solve their problems, I can totally see that. So, let's talk so I one of the things I saw on your website too was and it's probably an old number now, but you've now been able to help over 17,000 animals.
Yeah, it's over 22,000 now.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
Yeah, it's so small compared to, like, the big ones, but I feel like for the size we are, we
22,000 is a big number.
yeah, I know, but you know what, you look at, like, these some other organizations that have done millions, you're like, oh,
Sure.
but it's you know what, we're a pretty small but mighty group. We do a lot. There's only 13 people over there working, and only 7 of them are the vet staff, and they're just, doing a ton of work.
Well, one of the things I like, and I'm gonna clean it up because we're on the podcast, but on your TED Talk, you say, "If you mess with your head, you may find your true heart," which is what your aha moment?
Yes, yes, yes.
So talk about that.
So, I think I was saying before, like, I had this good life, but I felt like there was something that was missing, and I was,
Find your purpose.
and yeah, find my purpose. And I'd gone through a variety of other things, thinking like, yeah, nope, that's not it. And then going to India, I think the inspiration when the expats I met in Japan were like, yeah, if you really want to mess with your head, go to India. It was like, aha,
Yeah, I love
like
that term.
I need to mess things up because in order to be able to think differently, I need to get my head jumbled somehow so that I can get a different view, right? And so going to India really did that for me. It really just messed with my head in so many ways, and let me start seeing life and possibilities in a completely new way. And so yes, I did find my true heart, but I think I also say is that kind of be careful of that because if you follow it, it doesn't mean your life is gonna be all roses. It just means
Right.
maybe when things don't go right, it's for what your purpose is as opposed to what the CEO of your company is, and that I think makes a big difference for me
Right.
in my life.
Well, basically, you rebooted.
I rebooted. I rebooted.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. That's the way I look at it. But let's dig into because one of the big issues in well, in other countries as well, but as you mentioned earlier about the rabies, because that's to me, I mean, there's the typical stuff with rescues, the spay and neuter, and all that stuff. But
yeah,
the rabies seems to me, since India has the biggest numbers or deaths from rabies in the world.
yeah,
And in one of the things I read too, there's more stray dogs in India than any other country as well.
true.
So you've got all these stray dogs, and
Yeah,
as you I think you mentioned this, or we maybe when we had a conversation, in Indian culture and other cultures too, they look at it, well, not rabies vaccines, we'll just call them and kill all these animals. And
mm,
that doesn't get rid of it. So can
no.
you talk about that and what you guys are doing to fix that?
Yeah, I mean, right in 2008, like right before I started all of this, I went to India. They had just done a mass culling in in Dharamsala, and people just watched dogs keel over and die on the street.
Right.
And then in 2008, right after my trip, three people in the community died of rabies. A 4-year-old girl, like a grandma and a man. And then the people found the dog and beat it to death
Uh,
in the middle of
ooh.
a square.
Again, culture.
Yeah, really brutal. But also because there's no government agency that's going to come catch the dog and euthanize it,
Right.
right? I mean, there's nobody going to help them. Now, granted, they don't know enough. That dog would have ended up dying on his own. I don't know. And also back then, the local hospital didn't have the proper post-bite medication needed
Mm,
to prevent them from dying. So even if
right.
they knew, it's possible in 2008 they didn't even know what they needed, but back then I know for sure they did not have this rabies immunoglobulin that they need, and then the post-bite vaccination. So that wasn't even available locally until 2015, and this was in 2008. Otherwise, they would have had to drive 6 hours
Sure.
to a city hospital. So, mind you, they probably didn't even know what to do. You know what I mean?
One of the things I read on your site too, just to interject here,
Mm.
and I love this actually. I mean, I love it and hate it at the same time. So rabies is 99% fatal, 100% preventable,
Yes, yes,
which is crazy.
which is crazy. Yeah. So, and the cheapest and most effective way to do it is through mass vaccination and stabilizing the population, right? Like that's because it's much more expensive to constantly to for the humans to get the post bite treatment
Right.
because they need 3 vaccines, they need this expensive immunoglobulin, and so it's much cheaper if you can maintain the dogs. And also the pets. The pets need to be vaccinated, because we've seen, Labradors, people coming to our clinic with Labradors that clearly have rabies, and they had no idea. They didn't even know the dog needed vaccinations. They didn't know. So it's all this education and culture and everything all and resources all mixed together. So what we do is again, like I said in the beginning, we just want to try to get the community involved. So even if we were out on a rescue, let's say someone called us for a rescue, and we went, and somebody would be talking to us, we would start having a conversation with that person, about the dog, like asking them if they feed the dog, asking them if they know it's been vaccinated, and just sort of like, and one thing, you were in India, like when you do things like this in India, a lot of times a crowd forms around
Hmm.
to watch what's happening.
Sure.
So you may be talking to 10 people as opposed to just one person. So in the beginning, because we didn't have our whole education program set up, this is kind of how we got things rolling, by just using these opportunities as educational
Platform.
opportunities. Yeah. And then for the past 7 years, we've done 10-day rabies vaccination camps. So we've done things like population surveys. So when you're doing these spay neuter programs, like the scientific approach is you're supposed to do population surveys, and there's different ways you can do them. And then you're supposed to only focus in one area to contain that one area for rabies and population stabilization. And these are things we all learned over time, because in the beginning, and even still today, a lot of rescues, all they're doing is just rescuing dogs,
Right.
and which is great. It's helping that one dog, but they're not doing anything for preventative, preventative.
The community are the dogs.
Exactly, exactly. So, in Indians, and I feel like I'm fine saying this, can be quite dramatic. So it's not the namaste that people think it is all the time. Like there's a lot of drama. So the rescues, really get tons of attention. But so then we've also had to educate, like, well, we can't come to your area where there's no rescue, because we have to focus getting this area of 5,000 dogs maintained.
And you're not and the number you put up in your site to be successful for a rabies vaccine in that area, you have to have 70% of the animals vaccinated, correct?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Which, by the way, is nearly impossible because dogs are smart.
of course.
So you go to an area and you try to catch them all to vaccinate them, right? Some of the dogs see what you're doing and they just run.
Sure.
I mean, they're not going to let you get near them. So it's a big coordination. So now, luckily, because we have more of these people feeding dogs, and so they're more happy to interact with the human, a lot of times we can just get the feeder to help get the dog, and we give the vaccine and give a treat. Years ago, we could have never done that. We were out net catching and they're chasing, and that still happens, by the way. There's still some dogs that just they're never gonna, want to be pet or by a human, but it's not easy, And there's other groups in India, and I'm sure in other parts of the world, where they have people who've been trained in blow dart guns.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, they do that in Indonesia.
Yeah, yeah. So we've thought about getting a couple of guys trained in that, but we'd have to send them far. Anyway, it's just one of those things that never happens, but it's on our list.
That's right.
So yeah, so there's the catching and the coordinating, and it's difficult. It's difficult to hit that number. And for sterilization stabilization, it's 90%.
Well, the crazy thing is, and we talked about this the last time we talked, is if the numbers are crazy. So an unspayed female dog and their offspring in 1 year can produce 11,000 dogs. So how do you,
Yeah.
when you've got all these animals that haven't been spayed and you keep going forward, I mean, the numbers are just astronomical.
It's tough. I go and it's, one of the things about dogs being born on the street, though, is that a lot of those puppies aren't going to even live. So that number does not equate to Indian street dogs,
Right. Okay.
because they're like, unlike a breeder who's going to, and not an Indian breeder, by the way, but like if you get a dog in the United States, or even if you adopt from a rescue, that dog has their vaccinations. There are all these puppy diseases, just like with babies. So, like, when you get a puppy, you're not supposed to bring it to the dog park right away. It's got to be fully vaccinated. So these dogs are just born on the street and they're not vaccinated, and the mom may be weak, and so the puppies get parvo, they get distemper. The mother may just not have enough food, and there's just all these factors that don't let that amount of dogs to come out of it.
Get there, because they get hit by cars, they get hit by rickshaws.
They get hit by cars. Yeah, and there's a lot of dumping, like, people don't want extra dogs in the area, so they move their puppies somewhere else and then dump them somewhere else or dump them at our clinic.
Quick question, so, in looking back on time,
Yeah.
what would you do differently that you did, and what are you most proud of where you are today?
Oh, what is this? An interview? No, 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 I get it, I get it. So,
I'm guessing it was probably not dealing with that one guy for sure.
well, you know what? I mean, when I look back, I don't regret any of it, but I think because I learned so much, like, because of what happened with that guy, I then learned how to deal with every other potential crook that came my way, and there were a lot, and there still are, you know? So, I became very savvy pretty quickly on how to work in India, you know?
Sure.
Granted, the court case went on way too long. I spent like 185 days in Indian court. That was too much. So I could put that aside. There's just also things I wish I knew more about when I dove in, but at the same time, it's part of my personality sometimes to just like jump in and figure it out as I go. I'm not somebody who always like plans ahead. I'm better now, because I have a bunch of people to pay and, numbers to hit and all that kind of stuff. And, I've learned a ton, but I don't think I don't regret that. Like I'm fine. Yeah. But yeah, I could have let go some of the harassment, for sure. And, and also, sorry, one of the things that is the most heartbreaking is that I didn't realize that Indian vets don't really know enough about small dog care.
Are they more for, like, farm animals and things like that?
Yeah, they go to vet school, and a lot of times they mostly learn about farm animals.
Uh-huh,
So we would come, and I would just expect that they would know how to treat parvo or know how to treat, and they would have no idea. So we ended up losing a lot of animals in the beginning because the staff we hired just didn't know how to manage it. And so then I had to learn and then figure out. So that's a big, it just breaks my heart, like more than anything. And when people talk to me about starting their own, now, I definitely speak to them about that. Is like make sure that you have proper procedures in place. That like just because you hire a vet doesn't mean they know anything.
sure.
So yeah, so that's a tough one.
Hiring a vet anywhere in the world doesn't mean they know anything, by the way. That's not exclusive to India.
Yeah, I guess I just expected them to at least know more than me, and that
Yeah.
definitely wasn't the case. So yeah, so we lost a lot of dogs in the beginning that I wish we hadn't. Yeah.
Here's an obscure question for you. I was thinking about when you were talking about the Dalai Lama. Now, again, my knowledge of him is, based on news and movies like, 7 Years in Tibet and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
What has he helped you guys? Because, when you hear about the religion, Buddhists are real careful about all living beings and all that. Has he had an impact for you guys to support that?
Well, no. So he is, yeah, he preaches wonderful things, and they have a huge, huge trust. The Dalai Lama Trust that grants out money to lots of organizations, like a lot of times Tibetan causes. Which is fine. And we did get about $1,000 from them once, and and I do not blame him for this at all, but like we were dealing with all of his secretaries that were anyway, it wasn't a great experience. Yeah, we basically told, and because he's there, no, it doesn't do anything. People assume that, and the Tibetans themselves have similar issues with dogs that the Indians do.
Right.
So they also grew up, whether it was Tibet or they grew up mostly in India or born in India, they're also having the same cultural issues with dogs. So, like, I know monks that ignore dogs as much as any person ignores dogs. Yeah.
Is most everybody up in that area there, are they all Buddhist?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think all Tibetans are Buddhist, but just like with any religion, it's how you're practicing, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, and also Tibet well, a lot of things is Tibetans eat meat. They have a huge meat-heavy diet,
Yeah,
which is against, harming all things, but in Tibet, that's what they eat.
yeah, that's funny.
So, it's also the culture versus, religion, but yeah, I mean, one thing about living there is you could be highly disappointed, if you thought you were going to this place that was like Shangri-La,
Yeah, enlightened.
enlightened, and it's yeah, obviously there's good people and bad people everywhere,
Well, sure.
right? And that was sort of it. Like just recently we had a group of Tibetan nuns try to secretly dump a dog in a bag. This just happened 2 weeks ago at our clinic, and then we caught them because of cameras, and then they picked up the bag and were like running to the taxi, and we stopped them, and then anyway, so I mean,
That's crazy.
you know yeah, yeah. So, and I sometimes we're afraid to say these things out loud because we don't want to. One time, sometimes I feel like I ruin India for people when I talk like this, or Buddhism or something. And then also, we don't want to lose donors because they think we're making stuff up. But I mean, it's just a huge reminder that people are people. You know.
Yeah, so yeah, well, that's like everywhere. But one of your sayings, and I can't remember it's from your TED talk, and I really I really like this. It's be kind to strays.
Oh yeah.
I think it's a great saying. I mean, and I think it's relevant to especially there because, you know, culturally, again, where you were talking about where they look at the dogs as stray and they're trying to protect them from getting bitten to get rabies.
Yeah.
If they're kinder to them, these dogs will trust them more and they're not going to bite them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty simple thing. Simple is not easy, by the way.
No, no. I no, it's not. But I mean, you also asked earlier, like, what's I'm most proud of, I guess, and so that kind of ties into this question is that
Sure.
the changes we've seen over the years have been amazing. Like, a lot of the biggest supporters of our group and the people who feed the most dogs and adopt these dogs and there are people who were like, teenagers when we first started this,
Wow.
and now they're in their 20s. So you see that and you're like, okay, change does happen. It just can take it just takes time. It's just, small little things at the same time. But like when you go, and now because I only go to India once a year, it's even more astounding to me. When you drive around or walk around, the dogs you see look much healthier, they're fatter, they're friendly with humans. There's more and more people feeding and caring and adopting them. Just there's less of them, so we used to drive down the street, walk down the street, and there'd be so many, and now sometimes you can drive and not see any, you know?
Well, that's awesome.
So that's what I'm proud of, and that we have this team that also is motivated, to do this, and they're all Indian, they're all mostly local, people who have dedicated their lives to this. I mean, obviously, we have people that come and go, but, like, they can actually see that change as well. So, it's what keeps us all going, and I guess what, keeps us proud.
Well, you're doing great things. So let me ask you a different one. It's on the subject, but I found it really interesting because it's Dharamsala, but the dog's name is Dharma.
Oh, Dharma dog?
Yeah, Dharma dog.
That's because Dharma is a Buddhist, word.
Right. But I love the fact because when you read about it, he's the one that helped the whatever the god go to heaven, and
Yeah.
but he's blessed for his dedication to righteousness and the lack of selfishness. I thought that was really cool. And then dog is Yama, god of, the god of justice,
Uh-huh.
which is kind of cool that almost you could utilize that to help educate people about dogs since they've already got it in their religion.
Yeah, there's a lot people have tried that in the past. We haven't had any
Uh-huh.
luck with that. I would say the Dharma dog we have is more of just a cute marketing
Right,
logo, you know what I mean? To just say we're from Dharamsala, where the Dalai Lama's from, and yoga and
right.
all that kind of stuff. But religion does play a huge role. Like for instance, like most villagers, like do not believe spaying a female dog is okay. They think it's against the religion.
Yeah.
So like we have a new rural village program that we just started. So there was a mother daughter program that we ran, and so we equated how no mother wants to see their child suffer, right, and die. So, like,
Right.
and they also don't love seeing these dogs die on the road, you know, so it's like sterilization is, you know, spaying this dog is what's going to prevent that from happening, you know. So you're actually taking care of your children, you know, and that seemed to connect, you know, with people.
Well, similar to that book that you had that you were reading to the kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's relating to that, you know,
Just yeah.
it's, you know, it's pretty crazy how people think different ways. I'm one of the things that you I think it's in your website or something I read, you know, when people get rabies and, you know, again, this becomes from educating using past tradition,
Mm.
turmeric and holy water to
Oh,
solve rabies.
yeah.
Turmeric fixes everything over there, I know.
Turmeric face, yeah. So this is like a huge problem. Like we know, because like I said, we've been doing these rural village programs, and we've learned recently that a lot of times people actually know that they're supposed to go to the hospital and get their post-bite protocol vaccinations,
Right.
but they'll go get one, and then they'll come back and they'll talk to their local pundit, who's like the local priest of their village, and that person will say, like, "Oh no, you just need to go to this temple and drink holy water and you'll be fine." And they're listening to that. So how do you break that, you know?
Teach the priest.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is
Right.
yeah. So those are things that make the work honestly more interesting than if I was doing this in the US, but the also more difficult to, you know, because this culture is like thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. So like
Yeah, but this is perfect for you because in your TED Talk, you say how competitive you are, so it gives you the challenge that you need.
right. Yeah, there's always a challenge. There's always a challenge. Yeah. Mhm.
So, is there anything else you wanna tell everybody aside from and we're gonna get there, how everybody can find you on social media and
Yeah.
website and all that, and how they can help you, but is there any last thing you wanna talk about on your organization to help educate people what you're doing over there, or should we go direct to that?
Sure. Like, I think one thing I like to think about as opposed to a lot of rescues, like people tend to think about rescues as like rescue animals, spay neuter. Like for me and for our team, like we're really a community development organization. So it's about how to make it better for the dogs and the people so that there's a better future for everyone,
Right.
you know, and like having them learn how to coexist because I for me that's the only way the future will improve and for the team. And so we're definitely wouldn't I wouldn't say like a typical rescue where, you know, we tend to like to think of ourselves as a community development organization. And I think that's just a different way of looking at things, whether it's better or worse, it is what it is. Yeah. But I'm proud of that too, because you know, we couldn't make these changes if we weren't working with the community. And that's apparent. Yeah.
Well, I think it goes to your mission statement, and you can change the words because at the beginning you talk about ending human street dog conflict. Basically,
Yeah.
if you reverse that and saying putting dogs and humans together so they coexist properly was probably another way of just saying the same thing you're saying.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how can everybody one find you, two help you? Let's get all your and I'll have this in the description of the
Oh, thank you.
in there, but let's talk while we're here. Why don't you go ahead and promote yourself a little bit?
Sure. Thank you. So we are on our social media is great. I have to say it can be, we definitely go between, you know, some graphic reality to a lot of fun, cute stuff too. So our Instagram is just Dar Animals or DAR, like Geranimals. I don't know how to say I'm not I can't even spell it. Yeah, Dar yeah, it's DAR yeah, just put D in front of animals, you know what I mean? And then,
Okay, the animals.
yes, yes, and then, our website is just Da Rescue, DA Rescue.
DA Rescue. Okay.
Yeah, .org.
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 Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly, and there's more information about what we do, about different projects we're working on, and, yeah.
So is the animals the same thing for Facebook and TikTok and all those other things?
Yes, yes, and for, YouTube we're not on TikTok, which, because it's banned in India.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, because the border of China and Kashmir, yeah, there's conflict. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny because it's sort of banned here now, but not really, but it is.
Not yet. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not gonna be. I mean, it's gonna be owned by a US company eventually in that. Okey doke. So, last thing, the joke, which everybody already starting to cringe, you have a joke to tell me to get out there, so let's hear your joke,
Oh, no, I gotta find it.
and then we'll go from there.
So this is just it's kind of a sweet joke, I thought, but it just says, "What do you get when you cross a dog and a calculator?"
What do you get when you cross a dog and a calculator? I don't know. What do you get?
A friend you can count on.
Oh, I like that one. That's a good one.
Isn't that
Yeah, it
cute?
is cute.
Yeah.
See, everybody, I need other people to tell jokes, obviously, because mine are terrible. But everybody that's out there listening, obviously, I'm always looking for jokes. So if you want your one of your children to do it, or you have a friend, or you want to do it and get on, we'll record it and put it on instead of me making my guest tell the joke or me and you cringing hearing me tell the jokes. That would be great. So if you could send it to me, M Kyle, Kyle, at forrealpodcast.com, or if you have a great idea that you think would be a good episode for it. I'm always looking for new content. So that would be great too. Again, mkyle at forrealpodcast.com. So, anyways, Deb, thanks so much for being on here. I know it takes time and we had a couple glitches here on the recording and all that, but I really, really appreciate you being on.
Oh my God, thank you so much for reaching out. I mean, it's anytime we can talk about what we do, it's great, and it's always fun meeting new people. So and hearing what you do, and I now have a new podcast to listen to, so it's great.
Oh, yeah, there you go, please. And you know what? But seriously,
Yeah.
I really, really appreciate it. And then for everybody else that's out there listening, as I always say, I really appreciate everybody. Please pass it on. The more followers we get, the more more content we get. So please keep following, pass it on, listen. You get to learn all about these wonderful people doing wonderful things. And again, from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate you guys for real.
For real, 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 for real.
We're supported by Let's Walk, that's here to love your animals like our own.
Austin, Houston, and Denver. Let's Walk is here to love your animals like our own. From daily walks, play, in-house sleepovers, and more. Go to work, out on the town, or take a vacation knowing your pets are in the best hands. This woman-owned small business does it all. Check us out on Instagram at Let's Walk Austin, Houston, and Denver.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.